In this video, we will learn about the essential tentpoles needed to grow a thriving organic community around a brand from Adriaan Zimerman. Adriaan grew BroBible to 15 plus million readers a month before it was acquired by Woven Media. He is also a four-time founder with 2 successful exits under his belt. Adriaan will talk to us about advertising strategy when leveraging podcast partnerships, common pitfalls for D2C brands, and his latest venture, Mojo Country Club, nootropic gummies for golfers. Adriaan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, so happy to be here. I know it's been in the works for a little bit, so glad we're making it happen.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. I know you've got a new project that you're working on. What is your business and what pain point does it solve for?
Yeah, so actually just exited my last business, Ned, about 3 months ago, and have already been working on the new one. And you will officially be the first podcast to hear about it. It's called Mojo Country Club, and we are making nootropic gummies for the game of golf. So they're designed and formulated to help with confidence, tempo, focus, and really just kind of play to the adage that, golf is a game that's played on a 5-inch course, which is the distance between your ears. And there's never been a product before that actually addresses the mental needs of the golf game in a very simple, very tasty gummy. So we'll be launching that in Q2. And yeah, it's really about fun, at the end of the day. I think we're all very limited on leisure time and always find excuses to not make the most of the time that we do have. I think a good nootropic can really assist in elevating the fun that you're really supposed to get from a game of golf. So
it definitely seems like it's in your lane. We're going to talk a little bit about some past ventures of yours today as well. The company that you were just referred to that you exited most recently was Ned Co. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was correct me, but holistic, supplements, really from what I can understand, from the earth and whenever possible, sort of not altering the natural state of whatever ingredient you're going after.
Yeah, exactly. Ned is a wellness brand that's really rooted in that mission to help people feel better and live better through the powers of the natural world, right? So it doesn't necessarily just mean products, but there are so many plants and herbs and roots and minerals and fungi and algae and things that come from nature that can really help us feel better. But beyond just the products, the mission was really built around education and content that would help supplement the supplements. Right. Yeah. So it might even be just that reminder that, hey, if you're having a shitty day, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to turn to a product or especially a pharmaceutical. It could just be that you need a little sunshine on your face and you can take 5 minutes during your lunch break to go outside and soak up that vitamin D. And that in itself can really just alter your mood and bring a new level of energy into your day. And yeah, I think it was really a beautiful brand, something I'm really proud of that we built and helped a lot of people with everywhere from sleep issues to stress and anxiety to, pain and inflammation. And it was a really awesome 7-year run. We passed the torch to a company called Foria, and they're a really awesome brand in the space as well. And somebody we've admired for a long time. And when the opportunity came around to exit to them, I think it was a really natural fit.
Adriaan, just to give people a little bit of context, if they're not familiar with you, you're a serial entrepreneur. You've got multiple exits under your belt at this point. Just to give kind of a really brief kind of recap, I think you started in venture capital, 21 years old in Hong Kong, of all places. It seems like you were actually looking for a little bit of an adventure
Sure.
in that case. Ended up coming back to the States. You were in New York. Your first entrepreneurial experience was growing an eco-conscious loyalty program. From there, you moved on to BroBible, which grew into a real giant, 15 million plus readers per month, was acquired by Woven Media, which later became Uproxx. From there, I believe that you went and worked on LadBible. Is that what it's called?
Exactly.
LadBible. And I'm only saying this because I know you're comfortable talking about it. I've heard online, but I just thought this was really cool story / inciting incident. But you were over in the UK, you're working on LadBible, and you're experiencing some major burnout. You're in charge, you're running the team, and you actually had a full-on panic attack in front of, I think 75 employees or something like that. This experience ultimately led to a 2-year walkabout. Left business, all the things and sort of traveled around the world. And I think that as far as I can tell, really sort of centered you in a lot of ways, showed you what you were interested in, and maybe got you more aligned with a new business venture that was like more aligned with your personal philosophy when you came back out. So that and that business was Ned. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Well put. I mean, it was one of those moments in life that I think, should everyone be lucky enough to experience. It really sucks at the time.
Yeah.
It's really scary. It's really lonely. It's the type of life experience that completely rocks you to your core, because everything you kind of previously believed or held on to just kind of gets swept out from under your feet. So that moment, the way I've always described it, it was kind of a culmination of a long stretch of discontent and a lot of these kind of existential questions that we start asking ourselves as we advance in our lives and our careers. And it's that kind of question of like, is this really it? Right. And I think at the time I had one exit under my belt. I was working with the BroBible, which is one of the largest media entities in the world right now. I'd been advising them since pretty much their onset. Is fairly tangential to BroBible, of course, just based in the UK. And yeah, I mean, I think on paper my life was great and epic, and it was doing all the things that I really thought I wanted to do when I was looking at my future career, and kind of came out the back end of it just feeling a little lost, a little empty, and just kind of stuck in this cycle of work, play, date, kind of living this life I thought I wanted.
Yeah.
And, got out to the UK really thinking like, okay, this new place will reinvigorate my psyche. And after about a month, I started waking up with that same feeling of just, I have no agency over my life. I have no say in this, in this space. And if I leave it, I have no identity and nobody cares. And so I think that panic attack was just kind of finally the physical manifestation of all this mental turmoil that I was experiencing in my early 30s. And yeah, like I said, it's truly the best thing that ever could have happened to me. I think it really forced me to look inwards. And I was at this crossroads where it was either like take some Xanax and keep going, or it was really take a step back and try to figure something out.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I was able to take the latter and bought a one-way ticket to Nepal, as cliche as that sounds. And what I thought would be 2 months turned into 2 years of just wandering and really looking inwards, exploring art through photography and writing. And I think most importantly, I think I was really connecting with the outdoors, getting a really firsthand experience of how essential nature and the outdoors is to the human soul. I was really simplifying. I was living out of a bag where, in my bachelor pad in New York, I had just so much stuff. And then I think really the biggest thing with it was first true essence I think I ever had of human connection, because I think there was just like the kimono's open, like this is me, this is what happened to me. So I'm meeting people as I'm traveling, and I'm just sharing like who I am for the first time, not the narrative of who I am. So yeah, I think it was also a beautiful thing that I was able to kind of compact a lot of those experiences and package them into a brand around Ned. Not so much that it was a preachy thing. It was really just kind of trying to create some relatability to the fact that like this is shared experience. This is stuff that we all go through, and just confronting it without too much fear and with safety and community that you can start to unpack some of this for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I really, your story really resonates with me, and I really appreciate you being so sort of forthright about it. I can see that has kind of become your approach to it in podcasts that you're on, and just the way that you sort of are forward facing towards the public. You're very sort of like naked in your story, and it's really refreshing to see. I want to start kind of further back and go back to that first entrepreneurial experience before you kind of had all the success and had experienced some exits and that kind of thing. So first entrepreneurial experience, growing an eco-conscious loyalty program. I heard you say something to the effect of, you were growing social media, you were growing a content vehicle. In that case, it sounded like you were doing a lot of different things, and
Mhm.
ultimately maybe the mission of the company ended up getting lost. I wondered, what did you learn from that experience, and what sort of skills were you able to hone in after that led to BroBible?
Well, I'm glad we're starting there because I think it's so important to touch on the failures, and that one was a true failure. And I think I made a lot of the mistakes that a lot of first time founders make, which is trying to do too much. And that's kind of what I was getting at in mentioning the social network and the content side of the business, is that,
Yeah.
it wasn't even the mission. It got away from the product. Right. So I think what I was able to really gather after the fact was this idea of a one-stop shop it's just a bad idea. And I've heard it in a lot of pitches, actually, and
Right.
in investor decks. It's going to be a one-stop shop for this. It's just a bad idea to try to do that. All right.
Why is that? Because you do hear it a lot.
Yeah, you hear it a ton, but I think the fact that if you try to become a one-stop shop, you're not actually anything, right? So like, and especially when you're starting, it's so important to pick a lane and just charge it and become really good at that thing. Because I think what I learned from that first company, Greendevour, was that the core product was actually like a pretty decent little idea, but I was just so ambitious and had these rose tinted glasses on, just like, okay, this is going to be like the next. I'm going to be on the cover of Fast Time or Fast Company in a month, So I think by creating the core product, but then B, building a social network around it. And this is 2008 or 2007. So it's like, and by the time I launched the thing, like people would get to the site and be like, what is this? Like, why am I creating a profile to like buy eco-conscious goods? Right.
Right.
So it was a hard lesson, but a good one. And I'm glad I learned it that early in my career because it put it in stone in my head that like, just focus, like do not try to like build bells and whistles, especially before you launch, because you're just bound to fail.
What was the lane that you chose for BroBible then? That seems to be the big takeaway. Yeah.
So for BroBible, let me give you the second one and then we'll get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the second one, because it really relates to the first and BroBible, was that when you're launching a business and in the early stages, really trying to detach yourself from like what you originally were intending to build and just focus on like identifying the things that are working and really double down on those and just try not to waste a lot of time and resource on fixing the things that aren't working. Right. And I think it's a lot of us make this mistake when we build products that we get in our heads like, no, this is a product. This is what people want. This is what I want to build. This is where the value is.
Yeah.
And then what if nobody fucking uses it? Right. And meanwhile, you have something that people are using. And if you don't actually double down on that, then you're just going to run out of money and waste all your time. So with BroBible, I think it was really just a matter of kind of like, trying to understand what does this stand for? And I think for us, it was just trying to emulate that hungover Sunday morning conversation you have with your buddies in college where you're all sitting around the couches talking about the funny night before and who did what and like, what do you use to shave your balls?
Yeah.
Right? Like, just things like that. That was just, again, a very like honest way to look at it. And knowing that these are the conversations that are happening. So why not bring that into a digital environment? So we actually originally launched BroBible kind of as a forum. We thought it would become this community driven content thing. Although I don't think we ever even defined it that way. We just thought it would be a forum of sorts. And we were seeding content, writing some posts just to kind of get the conversation going. And this is where that second lesson came in, is that we all of a sudden started to realize like the content that we were putting out was not only just better qualitatively, it was getting a lot more eyeballs, it was getting a lot more engagement. So we kind of let go of the whole forum content exchange thing and just really focused in on becoming a media company. And again, I don't think we knew what a media company was yet at that point. It was just, we were all of a sudden becoming the content creators, and that pivot and that focus and that doubling down on what was working, I think was that first step in finding the hockey stick of growth.
And what was that initial platform that you were on, like the forum, or maybe even like the first one that you pivoted to after the forum?
It was completely custom built. I mean, that was 2008, right? So we had some devs we found in downtown Manhattan, and there's no windows in the office, and we just go there and build this thing with them. And so this is before, I think there was like the early stages of WordPress and all that stuff, but everything was custom for the first couple of years of BroBible.
Wow. So you're not like driving people to like Instagram, like an Instagram account or something like that. It was like a totally its own standalone
Yeah,
site.
and really social publishing wasn't even a thing at that point, right? Like it was still like the blog world. Um, so it was kind of, and we fell into it, right? Like we didn't intend to build that business.
Mm-hmm.
So we were learning as we went, trying to learn from the mistakes. Um, and then that didn't even bring in the business side of it. Like we didn't know how to make money online. So we were like, we started throwing concerts and parties and
Right.
doing like New York City Wing Fest. And just like engaging our readers offline. And it wasn't until probably like year 3 that we actually started to figure out how to monetize our traffic and of course kind of cater the content to a more advertiser friendly voice, which early days it was not.
So you ultimately grew, I mean, it may have grown even larger than this, but ultimately BroBible grew to like 15 plus million readers per month. What strategies were most effective in fostering that growth?
Again, this is before social publishing was really a big thing. So really being participants in the ecosystem was critical. And I think it stands true. Especially as today it feels like kind of the growth hacking days are kind of over, is being a participant in the community, meaning like we were doing link trades with a lot of other big blogs and we were kind of having those daily roundups that our writers were just incredible at being those participants. And then the content that we were creating, it was just always with an objective to be relatable. And I think that was kind of one of those things that early days, I think with social networks, with content, all of a sudden you realize like that is the key to unlock growth, is like find relatability in the content you create and people will connect with it. There was some guy at Facebook who wrote a book that was basically talking about homophily, that we like all have a limited amount of connections that we can each have. And this idea of like having a piece of content that everybody wants to connect with is just not real. Like the mass post doesn't actually work. So it's more about, okay, like if you create a piece of content, is this going to connect with your buddies that you grew up playing lacrosse with, or is it going to connect with the buddies you game with or listen to certain music with? And then that's how you like started to create like actual viral growth. And we saw a lot of our content take on a life of its own like that, like well beyond that little share that we could get from one source.
So those writers that you had on staff kind of doing that, were they not only were they finding like super relatable topics with, viral opportunity, but were they also sort of posting and interacting with those posts through their personal accounts? Like what was their sort of full role?
Yeah, they were the writers. And then, we all had handles, right? Like nobody was like at that early stage, nobody had their actual byline as their real name. It was always like an alias of some sort. And yeah, like there were our writers who would post content and then also engage in comments as their alias. As the business evolved, like really the writers became the business. I mean, they were kind of like, the business was the cookie, they were the chocolate chips, right?
Right.
So they were the ones that each had like their own fans, their own audiences, and yeah, that they really were like the people that, or who the people came to read, right? And yeah, that was a really cool thing. Like those writers were just, again, they were so good, and they just really understood the audience, and they listened, and they participated. They were not these like sage prophets. They were part of the community.
Were these people that had audiences when you found them, or did they grow their audiences sort of through the experience of working with BroBible? Like, how did you choose these people that happened, ended up being sort of your secret sauce?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Like we tended to find, and this was all driven by our kind of content officer. He was the editor of Duke's newspaper when he was in college, and he just had that like old media thing. But he would find writers that were active in community, whether it was on other blogs or other forums, on Reddit. Reddit was a really big one, and then they'd be invited to be a contributor. And then after kind of a trial period. If we started to see that like chocolate chip emerge within the
Mhm.
community, then they'd be brought on.
I see. Wow. I gotta be honest. That's a surprising answer to that question for me. I'm like, hey, you grew this company to this giant number of monthly readers. How did you do it? I thought you were going to, say, oh, well, this channel was really lucrative for us, or et cetera, et cetera. And so, really kind of going back to the actual content, the actual creators and creative it makes a lot of sense. But, that's awesome that that was sort of the thing that really moved the needle.
I mean, again, it was kind of all by accident. I think
Yeah.
we were really learning as we go. I think we were all young and just kind of cutting our teeth in a like finally successful business. And I think we learned, and I'm sure there were lots of failures along the way as far as writers coming through and content hooks and ideas.
Hmm.
So it's kind of one of those things that you just kind of forget about those and you remember the successes.
Right. Well, so as I kind of mentioned before, you moved from ultimately BroBible was acquired by Woven Media. This led you to go on and be an advisor at Lad Bible. So you have a lot of experience in this sort of like growing an organic community. Can you sort of detail some of the essential tent poles in growing an organic community around a brand?
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned one, which is relatability. It's this
Hmm.
idea of like finding commonality, right? Like what are these things that people within your community can really like hold on to and feel like there's a connection to it.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, that is the core. Because if there is not some sense of commonality, then it's just like this weird drifting anchor. And I think what was the big difference between BroBible and Lad Bible, because Lad Bible grew at a rate that BroBible never could have dreamed of. Like I met the guys a year after they started it. I think they were already at 100 million readers a month, and it was all really driven by social publishing. So that was where media had this transition, and the way that like the old school media guys were talking about is like, fuck, like Facebook just acquired 90% of media businesses without spending a penny, right? Like they created this vehicle that would drive traffic in such huge numbers that it became the lifeline, right? Like when we started BroBible, there was no content on Facebook. So it was all organic and it was slow and it was real. Flat Bible, like they really just cracked that code of like what can become viral. And it would just send such massive amounts of traffic that was equally real, but at such a scale that I mean, it was just incredible. And as it stands today, I mean, they IPO'd on the London Stock Exchange. I think close to 400 million pounds. Um, I mean, they just absolutely hit a home run. And yeah, so it was a bit of a learning thing, but it was all driven by relatability, right? It's like, what is a piece of content that you're going to see, and why are you going to share it, and who are you going to share it with, right? It's probably
Right.
not going to be the thing you post on your, you know, Facebook page at that point. It was more like you're going to start tagging certain friends in the comments and be like, you have to see this.
Right. So that sort of takes us fast forward to Ned Co. I wanted to talk about sort of how you grew Ned. This was after the walkabout. You come back, you're thinking about the simplicity of nature, and sort of found this company that created this company that really aligned with your personal mission. I've heard you sort of call out storytelling and also podcasts being really core pieces of your strategy in growing Ned. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, for sure. So I think first and foremost, storytelling is important in any brand. I
Yeah.
think you can build a business, but if you want to build a brand, you really need to lean into storytelling and identify your mission, be able to articulate an origin story that connects with people. So that was the easy part for us because I had my story. My co-founder, his story was really rooted in his mom's struggle with breast cancer and this pursuit of a more natural way of healing. So that was just innate and natural to the brand. A couple of reasons why podcast was so impactful. One was that it was one of the only advertising channels we could leverage at that point because our first products had CBD in them. So we couldn't advertise on Facebook. We couldn't advertise on Google. So me as like the marketer coming in, I kind of felt like I was walking into a boxing match with my hands tied behind my back. Like I couldn't really take advantage of the things I knew. Podcast emerged. It was actually my co-founder who, encouraged us to start exploring that. And it was a few months after we started the business, and we were just kind of like, slow rolling and making mistakes, learning from them. And then I think we had $5,000 in the bank. Like we bootstrapped the whole thing. And we all of a sudden had this opportunity come about that was going to cost us $6,000 to advertise on a podcast called Mind Pump. And it's these 3 great former personal trainers who just have like an incredible community. They vetted us from top to bottom and decided they partner with us. And all of a sudden that unlocked like longer form content about the brand, about the products that started to resonate with people in a way that I don't think many brands in the space saw. So it was an early lesson that this could work. And then we just like really leaned into podcast, and we thought every podcast was going to perform like that. Quickly learned that like, it's a dime a dozen, but that a dime a dozen that will fail. But it was long form content. It was an opportunity for us to be guests as well. Not always paid, some organic, some paid. That would allow us to share our stories. And it was that long form content, that 30 to 60 minutes of just kind of like we talked about before, like open the kimono and be like, this is us. Like we're not trying to be, the elitist, the guy who's on the cover of, it's just, this is us. Like we've had failures, we've had mental health struggles, we've had sick families, like the things that people actually deal with in their lives. And I think that's what allowed that channel to be so impactful for us.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask that about the podcast. So when you say you partnered with Mind Pump, is that reading ads on their show on a weekly basis? You guys are guests on their podcast? Like what did that actually look like?
Yeah, we were never actually guests on their podcast. But yeah, we sponsored the show. So they would do organic reads every couple of weeks. Like the formula that, just to talk, nuts and bolts, that we came up with is we'd aim for like a 4 to 6 week pilot where we aim for 3 to 5 episodes, and then offer a discount code and then try to gauge performance based on that. So spend a few bucks, sponsor a show, do a pilot, and if it really performed well, try to block a long-term partnership in.
And what did what did it look like with the hosts? You say, you sort of highlight the hosts in the show. This podcast in particular really made a big impact. Were they using the products? Were they sort of providing some of that long form storytelling themselves of like, hey, I actually use this and this is what happened?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it goes. And, host read ads, I think always perform the best. We would insist before we even would agree to sign up for a pilot that they take, a couple months to just try our products, use them, get that firsthand experience, because without it, all of a sudden the authenticity is gone, right? Like it's just an ad read. And we had plenty of those. Like we tried some of these spots that were bigger names and they just didn't work. It had to be this sense of authenticity, true experience with the product and the brand, so that as an ad is read or there's an organic mention, that there's an actual connection with it. And that's also part of the branding, right? Like you just have to align yourself with partners that will be authentic along with you. When you veer away from that, which we did, and we tried to go for scale and big numbers and blah, 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 they just flop. I think we spent 25 grand on one podcast of a big name and got absolutely smoked. Like, I don't think we had one conversion from it. It was just dead to their audience.
So is this you guys so I'm just sort of imagining your strategy after that sort of initial spark with Mind Pump. You guys are going and looking at other podcasts that are sort of in your niche. Did you find any patterns in terms of where you found success and like maybe size of podcast, size of community? Were there any tells from engaging with the podcast before you actually partnered?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect science. We did our best, but we would kind of do our well-rounded research. So if a show looked like it had a lot of downloads, we would check their social and try to see like what that engagement rate looked like on social. And could this just be fluffed up numbers? And I think there is a real difference between a podcast with an audience and a podcast with a community, right? So a community is the one that's really engaging, and they're identifying themselves as part of this community. An audience is just one that you might want to listen to on a flight, or, to pass the time, or in the car. Like, you're not really like a diehard or
Sure.
really care that much about the alignment with that show. So I don't know, just from personal experience, it's like The Daily from the New York Times, great podcast, but like, I'm not part of that community. I just listen to it for the content. And then, a podcast like Mind Pump, you can't help but create connection with the hosts and feel like, as they're engaging with their community, that you're being spoken to and they're there with you. They're not just talking to you.
Right. Right. So just, I guess one more about Ned Co. Ned Co was, I think 100% D2C for a long time. What do you feel like you refined about that single channel approach? And what is something that you see a lot of D2C companies maybe falling victim to?
So this came back to that idea of focus, and had we bootstrapped a company that tried to go omni-channel day one, like, smoked, we'd be out of money in no time. So being focused on D2C allowed us to have a direct dialogue with our customers. It allowed us to, really focus on customer experience. And Ned became kind of a poster child of what a good DTC experience could be. And I think it was reflected in our numbers. Like, we were 80% recurring subscription revenue. And I think like the big mistake that a lot of DTC companies will make, and even those that have a focus on subscription, is they really focus on kind of like a linear customer experience, right? Like, it's acquire them, hopefully they convert into subscription, and then they're just like sent off into the abyss. And if they renew, great, we'll send them the emails, blah, blah, blah. But like, there's not a real sense of novelty in that experience. So I think that's something we did really uniquely well with Ned. We built a program that was kind of built around this very cyclical customer experience, and had this framework that we called ARE, that focused on 3 core pillars. And it was the acquisition experience, the retention experience, and then the expansion experience. So on the acquisition front, pretty straightforward. It's like, what is going to get somebody over the hump to go from a one-time to a subscription purchase? On the retention side, it's like, how do you keep a sense of novelty in the customer experience, and how do you continue to build that relationship? And we did that through a number of different mechanisms. We had a really successful gifting program. So we would see that biggest drop-off point was between order 1 and order 2 for customers. So our question was, how can we create some anticipation for order 2 so that there's a greater level of retention there? So we introduced our gifting program. On order 2, we'd always send a gift, and order 1, we'd say something special is coming in your next order. And then that just skyrocketed retention for order 2.
Wow.
And it's, as I speak about it, it doesn't feel like rocket science. It's just kind of like common sense. It's like, reward people who are with you. And we would always tie the gifts to our mission. So it might not be super heavy product oriented, but like, there would be a theme that associated with our brand and our products.
It sounds expensive, if I'm being honest. What were I love that you say that it was, the gift would be tied to the theme. Can you give us an example? Like, what was a gift that worked really well for you?
Yeah. So, and just to address the expensive part, we just straight up looked at our Facebook ad metrics at that point. It was like, we had, I think it was like a $40 CAC for new customers. I think we were spending $22 on retargeted customers, and then we were spending like $12 on past purchasers. So if we're spending $12 on a past purchaser,
right,
could we spend $5 to $8 on a gift and just keep them that way, right?
Yeah.
Why pay Facebook to do it? So
yeah, it's actually not expensive.
Yeah. So a great example, in 2021, we launched Mellow Magnesium, which was,
a hero product, right?
Became the hero product. And it was our first mineral product. Minerals come from nature. And we were like, okay, well, let's put together a little mineral gift set. So ultimately what we created was this really wonderful nutritive herbal salt, like kind of artisanal cooking salt, that had really wonderful benefits, antioxidant properties, and then a mineral sunscreen or lip balm that had some SPF to it, that a botanist that we had worked with for years created both of those products, and those are products that people wanted to buy after, right? Like and it cost us, I think it was $4 or something like that. That's just an example. And people would get gifts on average. After the second order, they'd get gifts every fourth order. So we're talking probably like 3 to 4 gifts per year. And when we look at the LTVs climb, like that investment is nothing. So
would the gift come with an education? I know the magnesium product was a big one for you. It seemed like it was a lot of people had a magnesium deficiency, and then I believe your magnesium had a higher absorbency, right, than competitors. So that was sort of the unique kind of differentiator. So would they get was that an education then too? Like, here's a gift, and also we think you probably need this because
exactly. I mean,
needs this.
Education was a huge part of Ned, largely because of the types of products, right? Like anything you put in your body, you kind of want to know about, and especially if there's a struggle that you're trying to address, right? Like sleep issues, stress. Like you want to kind of learn about it and why and how it works. The products would always come with some bit of collateral, and that would be educational, that would speak to the product, speak to the sourcing. Sourcing was always a really big one too. I think bringing a sense of the people and the places where these products come from was really just like built trust. It gave greater kind of affinity for the brand and products. And all of a sudden, like people felt like they knew our farmer, right? The farmer that was growing our hemp. And then we eventually rolled it into this greater, like what we called our Farm to Net Alliance, and that was a number of independent farmers that were organic and or regenerative around the country, and we would tell their stories. And it was really a big piece of the collateral mission was to tell that story of the people, places, and then what these products are and why they will inevitably help you.
Sure. Adriaan, can you what constitutes a successful founder?
I think failure, because I think ultimately, like every successful founder fails their way to success, right? Like they might be big, they might be small, they might be hiccups, they might be, I failed my last company kind of thing. But yeah, and I'm reluctant to say getting comfortable with failure because it's never comfortable, it's never fun. But ultimately, like success comes from collective number of failures.
Is it do you hold that as such a strong value that you would even maybe aspire to it in your future? I know you're nowhere near done here. You got a new project you started on the heels of your last. Are you thinking, oh, maybe my greatest failure is yet to come, and maybe my greatest success is yet to come as well?
Totally. I mean, I know they're going to come. I think it's kind of one of those things you just try to learn from it. Try not to make the mistake again, but there's so many mistakes to make, right? And I think probably what I just aspired to do is not make the same mistake twice. So try to keep that log of failures, and yeah, I think we'll unlock success. It's the key to it.
What about in terms of a marketer? What constitutes a world-class marketer, in your opinion?
I think world-class marketers need to both be great listeners and great observers. Listeners, kind of obvious, right? Like you want to hear what your customers are saying. Observers is probably the more important part, which is that the fact that like your customers don't always know what they want, and they might be speaking from an aspirational point of view rather than like the person they actually are, right? So there's a great book that kind of became a Bible for us at one point in Ned called The Mom Test. It's basically the very brief premise is like you go to your mom and you're like, hey, I'm going to build an app that's a cookbook. It's going to cost $30. Would you buy it? Your mom, of course, is going to be like, of course, honey. Like, yeah, she loves you. She doesn't want to hurt your feelings. But the actual question to ask is, hey, mom, like, when's the last time you used a cookbook? When's the last time you bought a cookbook? How much did you spend on it? I think whether it's explicitly asking which becomes a listening exercise or observing and just seeing like how do they actually behave in certain environments. Um, yeah, I think that makes marketing easier and possible and effective. Without it, you're just kind of like throwing your ideas out and hope they stick.
Adriaan, just a sort of elevated answer that I was hoping from you. You really are. You got an elevated mindset. Like I say, it's aspirational. Anyone who's interested in a really great entrepreneur story, I encourage anyone to sort of go out and search some interviews with you. But I just thought we could end with this. I've heard you kind of talk about something of a mantra that you've taken on, I believe, from your time on the walkabout. It's that you now find pleasure in the pathless woods. So that really resonated with me, and I just wondered, how do you find pleasure in the pathless woods today? What gets you excited about your career, your life these days?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think is one of those reasons that I felt ready to sell Ned. Is kind of a yearning for this kind of like upheaval. And I've done this to myself a number of times where a lot of changes happen really quickly. So, selling one business, starting another in a new industry that I really, I'm learning about every day. Currently 2 days away from selling this house in the mountains that my wife and I built and we love. And it's just this little sanctuary, but 2-year-old. And we're like, okay, what else is there? So we're buying a 35-acre farm and
Wow.
no idea what that's going to be. That's going to be a new adventure. I've never driven a tractor and getting one with the property. So always trying to keep myself a little bit uncomfortable. I think it's easy to lose that when you're in something as long as I was in Ned, 7 years, I think is about the maximum anybody should be in business. Yeah, I think like I'm entering this next chapter with an objective and an experiment on whether I can actually create and build a business and a brand very effectively while prioritizing time and my family. Just an example of that, I'm instituting a non-negotiable Tuesday adventure date with my wife. So we live in Colorado. I almost forgot we lived in Colorado when I was in Ned because it was just so full on. So if no matter what, no matter how busy things get, I'm not working on Tuesdays, I'm not checking emails, and we're going to go climb a mountain, or we went snowshoeing last week, or go snowboarding at a new mountain, and just see if that is possible. Ultimately, I think we all pursue a better version of our life than yesterday, right? Like that's kind of that's just the human condition. So yeah, it's an experiment and I have no idea if it's going to work, but part of it is quite literally wandering in pathless woods, and others more figuratively seeing if this will work and if it fails. But I think Mojo will be great. I did a little smoke test, demand test with it, did a lot of customer listening and surveying, and like this is, I think it's going to be a fun one. And
it's right on trend, man. Honestly, love the name, love the packaging, love the mission. I mean, it's like I'm already gifting it to my brother. It really, seriously.
Cool. Well, let me gift it to you, and you can gift it to your brother.
Thank you. Yeah. You know what? Just one more little tactical piece. I just thought that was interesting. You said, keep yourself a little uncomfortable. For a guy who 35-acre farm, you're in sort of, you're seeing some of the fruits of your labors now. Yeah. What's a way that you keep yourself a little uncomfortable on a day-to-day basis? Can you give me an example?
I'm like in the throes of experimenting with it a lot right now. I mean, it's super cliche these days, but hot cold exposure therapy is great. So I'm a half Finnish also. It's like I grew up with sauna and my grandpa beating me with birch branches in there. And like, I think bringing that back into my life and making sure like I'm not too comfortable. But
yeah,
I've been thinking a lot about it, especially as like, we've been able to live really well. Is like, how do you not fall into the comfort crisis? And there's a book titled The Comfort Crisis. That's a good little guidebook as to how not to get too comfortable. And I think one small example is like, we could very well hire movers to do everything here in this house. And it's one of those things that's like, well, why? Like, let's just like do it all ourselves and like carry a bunch of shit and pack a bunch of shit and like do all that. So it's a small one.
Not that small, man. I've moved a couple times in the recent years. That's it's good on you for really putting your walking your talk.
Yeah, well, trying to. And it's truly like, especially in Ned interviews, I was always just trying to be very honest and explicit. Like, this is all a work in progress, right? Like it's not binary. I haven't like hacked or figured something out. Like this is like always trying and failing. And like, I certainly don't always walk the talk. I find myself slipping back in old patterns, and then I have to catch myself and try to repair that. So there is no binary in this journey.
Absolutely. Well, Adriaan Zimerman, the new company is Mojo Country Club, coming out in Q2 of 2025. So we'll all keep our eyes open for that. Are there any anywhere that we can follow you, keep up with you, relevant platforms that you use regularly?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram, Adriaan Z, Adriaan with 2 A's. Not posting all that much these days, but yeah, that's kind of where I, share photos and updates on my life. And then I'm sure I'll be on plenty more podcasts and telling the updates to the story as they happen.
Nice. Well, Adriaan, thank you for all the time today, and all your words and your stories landed really well with me personally. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for inviting me on. I really, really enjoyed it. And thanks for also just doing your homework. It was really cool to see these parts of my life show up I wasn't really expecting. So really cool.
If you are listening and you are interested in exploding your own digital growth, you can get in touch with Jump 450 in the link below in the description. That is www.jump450.com. And do not forget to subscribe for more weekly episodes. We'll see you next time.